Millionaire was boarding his flight when little girls stopped him with words that froze his heart. This story will break you and rebuild you. So grab a blanket, settle in, and before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from. We'd love to know. Now let's begin. Nathan Cole moved through the private terminal with the kind of quiet command that came from years of selling certainty. His assistant's voice buzzed in his earpiece listing final details about the Zurich keynote, followed by the schedule for his meeting with the Prime Minister of Norway. Nathan barely responded. He adjusted his tailored navy suit jacket, tightened the strap on his leather carry-on, and made his way toward the stairs leading to his jet. It was parked on the tarmac under a washed-out afternoon sky engines humming low in patient readiness. His world was always in motion, always polished, always forward-facing. Momentum was everything. Emotions were distractions. He had built a career on that belief, writing bestsellers on productivity, authenticity, and the architecture of inner peace. Crowds filled stadiums to hear him speak. But in this moment, he was entirely alone, moving on automatic blind to anything beyond the next flight, the next stage, the next curated performance of control. He was halfway up the metal stairs when it happened, a small tug at the cuff of his coat. He turned sharp and fast, expecting a ground crew member or perhaps a forgotten document. Instead, he froze. 3 little girls stood at the bottom of the stairs, identical, no taller than his waist. Each one wearing a pale blue coat and mismatched shoes, blonde hair pulled back in loose ponytails, cheeks smudged with the faint ash of travel and worry. They clutched each other's hands with white knuckles. Their eyes were wide, too wide, and locked on him like they had been looking for him all their lives. The smallest one stepped forward. Her voice trembled but did not falter. She whispered one word. Help. For a long moment, Nathan didn't move. The world around him slowed. The engines softened. The wind silenced. Everything in his body told him to keep walking, to nod politely, to delegate this strange moment to someone else. But something deeper, older, cracked through. It wasn't logic. It was instinct. He stepped back down the stairs slowly, careful not to startle them. He crouched to their eye level and said in a voice he didn't recognize as his own, "Where's your mom?" The girls answered in eerie unison. "We don't know." His chest tightened. Behind him, the pilot called out that they were cleared for takeoff. Nathan didn't respond. He reached into his coat pocket and silenced his phone. He didn't look at the messages. He didn't glance at his watch. He focused entirely on the 3 small faces staring up at him with raw, terrible hope. The one who had spoken first looked down and opened her fist. In her palm was a locket, old and worn, shaped like a heart. She held it out to him. Nathan hesitated before taking it gently. When he opened the clasp, the air left his lungs. Inside was a faded photograph split in half. On one side, a young boy and girl stood beneath a carved tree, both smiling, wild-haired, and unkempt. He knew the photo. He kept the other half in his desk drawer back home. The boy was him. The girl was his sister, Ava. His throat closed. His mind spun. He had not seen Ava in over a decade. They had fought no, they had broken after their parents passed, after the family home was sold, after the money became a battlefield. She had accused him of selling out. He had accused her of abandoning everything. And then she was gone. Not a call, not a letter, just silence. He had told himself she was fine, that she had made her choice. But now, standing on a runway, holding a locket with her face in it, with 3 little girls looking up at him like they belonged to her, that lie shattered. He looked at the girl holding the locket. "What's your name, Lila?" she said, her voice a whisper. The other 2 answered next. Rosie said the one with the quiet eyes. June said the one clutching a small sketchbook with crumpled corners. Nathan repeated their names as if saying them out loud would make this real. Lila, Rosie, June. "You said you don't know where your mom is." Lila nodded. "She got sick. She fell down at the airport. They came in the loud car and took her. We weren't allowed to go. They tried to make us go with people in uniforms. But we ran away. We stayed near the plane because it looked safe." June lifted her sketchbook. Inside was a crayon drawing of a man in a suit standing next to a plane, 3 little girls at his feet. Above it was one word. Uncle Nathan blinked hard. How did you know? He couldn't finish the question. It didn't matter. Somehow they had found him. And now they were here. Alone. He stood up and reached for his phone, not to check his schedule, but to cancel the flight. His assistant began protesting, citing the Zurich speech, the press. He cut her off. Cancel it. All of it. He hung up. Then he turned back to the girls. Come with me, he said, and without hesitation they each took one of his hands. They walked with him back into the terminal, away from the jet, away from the life he had been scheduled to live. Inside the terminal, he led them to a quiet bench near the observation window. He bought them bottles of water and a small pack of crackers from the vending machine. They sat in silence, legs swinging above the floor, occasionally sneaking glances at him as they nibbled. He dialed the nearest hospital and explained that he believed his sister had been admitted. After some delay, a nurse confirmed it. Ava Cole, 38, collapsed at the terminal. No emergency contact, unconscious, stable, but in critical condition. No visitors had come. No one even knew who she was until now. Nathan stood slowly. We're going to the hospital. Your mom's there. The girls nodded solemnly. Lila slipped her hand into his. Rosie followed suit. June held her sketchbook close. The drive was quiet. They huddled in the back seat of his black SUV, watching the city blur past. Nathan glanced at them through the mirror more than he looked at the road. 3 little girls who looked so much like Ava, it hurt to stare too long. He had missed so much. How had he not known? How had he not searched? At the hospital, a nurse met them at the entrance. Her eyes widened as she saw the girls. She ushered them quickly to a quiet lounge and asked Nathan to follow. He was led into Ava's room. She lay pale against the stark white of the bed, eyes closed, chest rising and falling beneath the oxygen line. Machines beeped steadily. Her face was thinner than he remembered, her hair longer, her hands limp on the sheets. He approached slowly, as if afraid to disturb the stillness. He sat down beside her. He didn't speak right away, just stared at the girl who had once been his whole world. They had fought like fire and ice, always challenging, always circling each other like mirrors, too afraid to show their full reflections. And then he had left. He had chased the world. And she had disappeared. But she had not disappeared alone. She had built a life. She had raised 3 children. And somehow in her absence, she had not erased him completely. She had kept his photo, taught the girls who he was. Had they waited for him? He finally whispered Ava. It's me, Nathan. I found them. Or maybe they found me. His voice cracked. He looked down at his hands. I should have come for you. I didn't know how. I thought you hated me, but I'm here now. I'm not leaving them. Or you. The nurse re-entered quietly. The girls are asking for you. He nodded, wiped his eyes, and stood. In the lounge, the girls were drawing on clipboards. Rosie had made a picture of a heart with stick figures holding hands. She pointed to it. That's you, she said. With us. He swallowed hard and nodded. That's a pretty good drawing. Lila looked up. Will she wake up? He didn't know the answer. He crouched again to their level. I hope so. But no matter what, I'm going to stay with you until she does. The girls didn't question him. They believed him. And in that moment, Nathan believed himself too. Outside, his jet still waited on the runway. But Nathan Cole had already left that world behind. He wasn't boarding any plane. He was exactly where he needed to be. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man performing his purpose. He felt like a man who had finally found it. The hospital hallway felt colder the second time Nathan walked it. The floor tiles echoed with a softness that reminded him more of chapel steps than of medicine. In one room, monitors beeped rhythmically like whispers of time slipping away. In another, a television played cartoons at low volume where the triplets, Lila, Rosie, and June, curled on the couch, their legs tangled, heads resting against each other. A nurse had draped a knitted blanket over them, but Nathan doubted they were sleeping. They were children trying to be brave in a world that had already asked too much of them. He stood for a moment, just watching them, holding a paper coffee cup in both hands, though the liquid inside had long since gone cold. His mind wandered back to the photograph in the locket. He had stared at it again and again that morning while the girls ate a quiet breakfast of peanut butter crackers and hospital milk cartons. There had been no mistaking it. It was the same photo he kept tucked in the bottom drawer of his nightstand behind tax documents and an old boarding pass from his first book tour. He had told himself for years that he had no family left, that Ava had chosen her path, that their silence was mutual. But the locket proved otherwise. She had kept a piece of their childhood. She had shown it to her daughters. She had not erased him. And now those little girls were curled like kittens under a worn blanket while their mother lay unconscious down the hall. Nathan approached the nurse's station, where a woman in scrubs tapped at a keyboard and offered him a polite smile. He returned it with a nod, then leaned closer and asked, "Has there been any change in Ava's condition?" The nurse's expression softened. "Not yet. Stable vitals. No signs of swelling. It's still early. The next few days will tell us more." He hesitated. "Is there anything I can do to help?" The nurse gave a sympathetic shrug. "Be here." Familiar voices. Familiar faces. "Those things matter more than you think," Nathan thanked her, and turned back toward the lounge. As he stepped inside, 3 pairs of eyes looked up. Lila blinked sleepily. Rosie clutched the stuffed bear someone had left on the table. June was already scribbling something in her sketchbook. He sat on the floor beside them, stretching his long legs out as he took a breath. "How are you all holding up?" Lila shrugged. "Okay, I guess." June didn't look up from her page. "I drew you again," she said softly. She handed him the sketchbook. This time the drawing showed a house with a big tree out front. Beneath the tree, 4 figures stood holding hands. The tall one in the middle wore a tie. The word "uncle" was written in large block letters above it. Nathan swallowed, his throat tightening around a reply. "That's a beautiful drawing," he said, his voice gentler than he meant it to be. "Is that where you used to live?" June shook her head. "No. I made it up. It's where I hope we'll live one day." The words hit him like a weight he hadn't prepared to carry. Rosie scooted closer to him, resting her head lightly against his arm. "Do we have to go with the lady from the office now?" she asked. "The one with the clipboard." Nathan glanced toward the door. He had noticed a woman in a gray skirt suit earlier speaking to a hospital social worker. "Not if I can help it," he said. "You're with me right now." "That's what matters." Lila looked up sharply. "Do you know Mommy from before?" It was the question he had been bracing for since the first time they said her name. He nodded slowly. "A long time ago. Yes, she's my sister." The girls exchanged glances. Something passed between them, something silent and weighty. Finally, Lila said, "She told us she had a brother once, but she said he was really busy and kind of far away." Nathan exhaled slowly. She wasn't wrong. June flipped through her sketchbook again and stopped on a page that made Nathan's heart stop. It was a crayon version of the same photo from the locket. The carved tree, the young boy and girl. "She showed us this a long time ago," June said. "Said it was a memory. I didn't know it was real until now." A knock at the lounge door interrupted them. A hospital staff member poked her head in. "Mr. Cole, there's someone here from Child Protective Services. Would you be willing to speak with her?" Nathan stood slowly. "Of course." He turned to the girls. "Stay here, okay? I'll be right back." The woman waiting for him in the hallway introduced herself as Claire Stanton. She had a slim folder tucked under her arm and a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you for taking the time, Mr. Cole," she said. "I understand you've been staying with the children since their mother was brought in." "Yes," Nathan said. "They were alone at the airport. I happened to be there when they approached me." Claire raised a neatly groomed brow. "Happened to be there?" Nathan held her gaze. "They're my nieces. I only just discovered that their mother is my sister. We've been estranged, I see," Claire said, scribbling something in her folder. "Have you established legal guardianship?" Not yet, Nathan replied, but I intend to. As soon as possible, Claire offered a smile that felt more like a test. That process can take time. In the meantime, we may need to place the children in temporary foster care, just until their mother regains consciousness or guardianship is formalized. That won't be necessary, Nathan said, his tone tightening. I'm not leaving them. I have the resources to provide care, and they know me. That matters, doesn't it? Claire's eyes flicked to his suit, his watch, then back to his face. Resources are only part of the equation. We're looking for emotional stability, long-term availability. You're a public figure, aren't you? I was, Nathan said. Right now I'm just their uncle, and I'll do whatever it takes. Claire gave a small nod and closed her folder. We'll be in touch. Nathan returned to the lounge with his jaw set. The girls looked up at him anxiously. Are they taking us away? Rosie asked. Nathan crouched in front of them. No, not if I can help it. But I need to speak with someone about making sure you can stay with me for as long as you need. Forever, June asked quietly. Nathan didn't answer right away. Then he said, let's take this one step at a time. But yes, that's the goal. Later that afternoon, while the girls were watching a nature documentary in the pediatric playroom, Nathan slipped back into Ava's hospital room. The beeping of the machines was steady. Her chest rose and fell with a slow, mechanical rhythm. He sat beside her again, resting his elbows on his knees, hands clasped. You're causing quite the storm, Ava, he said softly. You always did like making things complicated. He looked at her face, pale and still, and tried to remember the last time they had spoken. It was after the funeral. Or maybe before. He couldn't remember if he had yelled or walked out in silence. He just remembered the weight of loss and the sharpness of blame. He leaned forward. You should have told me. About them. About anything. But you didn't. You shut me out and I let you. I told myself it was your choice. That you didn't want me in your life. But I was just a coward. I didn't want to feel that again. That kind of pain. So I built a life where I wouldn't have to. I stood on stages and told people how to be present, how to forgive, how to love without condition. And I couldn't even call my own sister. He swallowed hard. But they found me. Your girls. They're incredible, brave, scared, beautiful. They carry pieces of you. And of me too, maybe. Not by blood, but in other ways. They don't need a guru or a millionaire or a best-selling author. They need someone who stays. I want to be that person. I don't know if I'm good at it yet, but I'm trying. He sat back and looked at the ceiling. So if you can hear me, wake up soon. They miss you. And I need you to see what you built, what you protected, what you gave me even if you didn't mean to. You gave me a reason to stop running. He reached forward and brushed a loose strand of hair from her forehead. Come back. Please, just come back. That night, Nathan slept in a chair in the hospital lounge while the girls curled into sleeping bags the nurses had brought from storage. June fell asleep, clutching her sketchbook. Rosie's stuffed bear lay between them. Lila stayed awake, the longest, staring at the ceiling, eyes unblinking. When she finally drifted off, her last word was whispered like a secret only the room could hear. Uncle Nathan didn't hear her. He was already asleep. But somehow it settled into the air between them, like a promise waiting to be kept, like the first thread of a life being rewoven. And for the first time in years, he didn't dream about flights or stages or the sound of applause. He dreamed of laughter, of a carved tree, of a home he hadn't yet seen. And when the morning came, Nathan Cole was still there, exactly where he was meant to be. The sun rose lazily that morning, filtering soft gold light through the hospital lounge windows. It landed gently on the cheeks of the three girls, painting halos around their sleeping heads. June's fingers still clutched her sketchbook, the cover slightly damp from how tightly she had held it through the night. Lila's legs were tangled in the sleeping bag, her arm flung protectively over Rosie, who had curled into a ball with the stuffed bear nestled under her chin. Nathan Cole stirred in the armchair nearby, a stiffness already crawling up his spine before he even opened his eyes. The chair was not made for sleep, certainly not for a man used to silk sheets and climate-controlled rooms. But strangely, he had slept more peacefully here than he had in months. He blinked against the soft morning light, rubbed his temples, and stood carefully trying not to disturb them. For a moment he just watched them, the quiet rhythm of their breathing, the way they had made a little world together from blankets and hospital sounds. No stage lights, no sold-out arenas, no applause. Just stillness and need, and something in their presence that had already begun rewiring the core of who he was. He stepped out of the lounge and made his way to the cafeteria, where a bleary-eyed nurse poured him a cup of black coffee. He took it without his usual complaint about roast strength or lack of oat milk. None of that seemed important anymore. As he returned to the pediatric floor, he saw a familiar face waiting by the nurse's station. Claire Stanton, the CPS representative from the day before, stood with her usual folder and practiced politeness. Her eyes flicked to the coffee in his hand before settling back on his face. "Mr. Cole, I was hoping to catch you early. I've been reviewing your preliminary file." Nathan nodded, not in greeting, but in cautious acknowledgement. And I still have questions. You've had no prior contact with the children. No documentation connecting you to them. The mother has not yet verified your relationship, and your public profile frankly raises some concerns. You're a speaker, not a parent. You travel internationally. Your books talk about intentional living, yet this entire situation appears impulsive. Nathan took a slow sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch before replying. "Do you know what I was doing when those girls found me?" She raised an eyebrow. "Boarding a private jet, I assume." "Yes," he said. "I was on my way to Zurich, sold-out keynote. A speech I spent months preparing. I could have ignored them. I could have waved over security or called the front desk. But I didn't. I stayed. I listened. And I haven't left their side since Claire tapped her folder unimpressed. Intentions are not the same as legal grounds, and custody decisions are not made on gestures. We need structure, evidence, a home address, stability." Nathan felt his jaw tighten. He wanted to argue, to raise his voice, to say something about love not being measurable in spreadsheets. But he paused, exhaled, and said instead, "Then let me give you what you need. I'll meet your standards. Whatever they are, I want guardianship, temporary, permanent joint, whatever is necessary, until my sister wakes up and can make the call herself." Claire tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "And if she decides she doesn't want you involved," Nathan did not blink, "then I'll respect that, but I'll still be here for the girls. Whether that means legal guardian or just someone who shows up with breakfast every morning. I'm not walking away." Claire said nothing for a moment. Then she gave a slight nod. "I'll need your legal team's contact and a full address of where the children would be staying if released into your care. Background check, income verification, residential suitability, all standard. You'll have it today," he said. She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there in the hallway, coffee cooling in his hand. He didn't notice that the girls had woken up until he turned and saw them peeking from the lounge doorway. June waved hesitantly. Nathan walked over and crouched down to meet their eyes. "How about pancakes this morning?" Rosie brightened. "With syrup. Only. If you promise not to tell the doctors," he said with a wink. An hour later, he took them to the hospital cafeteria. They sat at a table near the window, sunlight washing over their messy hair and mismatched clothes. Lila cut her pancakes into tiny pieces. Rosie dipped each bite into syrup with grave precision, and June drew flowers on her napkin. They were children again, just for a moment. Safe, fed, together. Nathan watched them with a strange ache building in his chest. Not regret exactly, more like realization. The kind that crept in slowly when the noise of ambition died down and the truth had room to speak. He took a photo of them, not to post or publicize, but to remember. He would need these moments to anchor him when the process got messy, when lawyers asked invasive questions, when reporters caught wind, when he had to explain to the world that the man who had sold millions of books on balance and clarity had been living without either. Later that morning, he stepped outside the hospital to call his longtime attorney, Richard Tran. Richard had handled everything from book contracts to intellectual property disputes. But when Nathan explained the situation, Richard was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You're really doing this. I'm already doing it." Nathan replied, "I just need the paperwork to catch up." Richard sighed. "All right. I'll prepare the documents. But you need to know this isn't a formality. CPS will dig. Judges will ask questions. This isn't a speaking gig, Nathan. It's life." "Messy, slow, emotional life, I know," Nathan said. "That's why I want it." By noon, the hospital social worker confirmed Ava was stable enough to be moved to a private room. Nathan paid for the upgrade without hesitation. He arranged for new pajamas and toothbrushes for the girls, ordered child-safe art supplies and puzzles. He even had a local furniture store deliver a small bookshelf and a beanbag chair to the room. If they were going to live at the hospital for a while, it would feel as much like home as possible. That afternoon, as the girls colored quietly on the floor beside Ava's bed, Nathan sat beside her, reading aloud from a picture book. Her eyes remained closed, her breath steady, but he had started talking to her as if she could hear him. He told her about June's drawing of the family tree, about Rosie's love of jelly beans, about how Lila had taken it upon herself to memorize every nurse's name. He described their courage at the airport, how they had found him, not the other way around. Later, after the girls had gone to sleep in the lounge, Nathan stayed in the room. He turned off the overhead lights, letting the small lamp cast a soft glow. He sat there for a long time in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "You were right, Ava. About everything. I built a life that looked good on paper. That sounded powerful on a stage. But I forgot how to show up when it mattered. When I forgot what it felt like to belong to someone, or to let them belong to me." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "But I'm here now, and I'm staying. For them. For you. For the boy and girl who carved their names into the tree behind the old house and promised they'd never lose each other." He reached into his coat and pulled out the torn photograph he had kept for over 10 years. He placed it gently on the tray beside her. The other half of the photo, the boy in the tree, the missing side of the story. "Come back, Ava," he whispered. "We're waiting." That night, as he stood in the hallway watching the girls sleep from a distance, the nurse approached quietly. "Mr. Cole." He turned. "Yes." She smiled gently. "The girls told one of our volunteers you're their uncle, and that you came just in time. They said you're the man from the picture. I didn't understand what they meant, but I think I do now." He knotted his throat too tight for words. The nurse added, "We've seen a lot of families come through here, but I've rarely seen children trust someone that quickly. Whatever happened between you and their mother, they seem to know you belong to them." Nathan looked back at the sleeping girls. "They saved me," he said, not the other way around. As he walked back to the chair he had claimed for himself beside Ava's bed, he felt something different settle into his bones. Not exhaustion, not grief, something steadier. Something like beginning again, not with fanfare, not with an audience. Just with 3 children, a broken photograph, and the courage to stay. The days began to blur into each other like watercolor paintings left out in the rain. Morning sunlight slid through the high windows of Ava's hospital room, always falling first across the pile of crayon drawings the girls placed carefully on her blanket. June was the most devoted artist, but Lila and Rosie had begun to add their own pieces, turning the small corner of the hospital room into a quiet museum of hope. The nurses began calling it the gallery, and one even tacked up a piece of string across the far wall so they could clip the drawings like clothes on a line. Every morning before they even brushed their teeth, the girls would walk to their mother's bedside, kiss her forehead, and tell her what they had dreamed. Sometimes the dreams were simple, like Rosie dreaming of flying with a bird made of light. Other times June whispered stories of long roads and quiet forests where Ava was waiting for them. Lila always stood back, observing as though she wanted to remember it all in case no one else did. Nathan watched these routines emerge with quiet reverence. He had begun to find his own patterns, too. He knew exactly how Rosie liked her apple slices peeled but not cut. He had learned that Lila preferred puzzles to books, and that June hummed softly when she was nervous, a barely there tune that reminded him of wind moving through trees. He woke up earlier than he used to often before the sun just to watch them sleep for a moment longer before the day officially began. The former version of himself would have been shocked by the simplicity of this life. No speaking engagements, no airport lounges, no hour-by-hour agendas. And yet, he had never felt more awake. Claire Stanton returned on the third morning this time with a clipboard and a carefully prepared tone that suggested bureaucracy disguised as compassion. She greeted the girls politely crouched to eye level and asked them how they were feeling. Rosie answered with a shrug. June clung to her sketchbook. Lila stepped forward and asked, "Are you the one who decides if we have to go away?" Claire blinked, then smiled. "I help make sure children are safe." That's all. Nathan stepped in before the moment could stretch into discomfort. "We're working on the paperwork," he said calmly. "My attorney has submitted everything requested. You should have the verification by end of day." Claire stood and adjusted her blazer. "I'm sure we will. In the meantime, we are still obligated to conduct a wellness assessment. A representative will visit whatever residence the children may be moved to, even temporarily." "Understood," Nathan said. I've made arrangements. He had in fact secured a short-term rental just 15 minutes from the hospital. A 2-story brick house with a sloped roof and a garden that hadn't been tended in years. He had picked it not for luxury or location, but for the big old oak tree that stood out front. It reminded him of the tree from the photograph, the one they had carved their names into as children. He had driven by it the day before and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes staring at the front porch as if Ava might open the door barefoot and laughing. The house had a warmth about it, even if it was currently empty. He planned to furnish it simply with beds for the girls, a room for Ava once she could leave the hospital, and a quiet study with tall windows for reading, or just watching the world unfold without a schedule. That afternoon, while Ava slept, and Claire reviewed documents in the hospital's administrative wing, Nathan sat on the floor with the girls and began sorting through June's drawings. He noticed one he hadn't seen before. A sketch of the big tree, only this time it had a symbol etched into the trunk, a looping spiral intersected by a vertical line. He frowned, recognizing it vaguely but unsure from where. "Where did you see this?" he asked June. She shrugged. "Mommy showed it to us once. Said it was the mark from the old tree. The one where she used to play." Nathan stared at it for a long moment. The symbol had been their secret when they were kids, a mark they made in the bark with a pocket knife hidden behind vines and ivy. It meant home. It meant promise. It meant something sacred and childish and real. "She said it's the place she misses when she's tired," June added. "That the tree keeps memories, even ones that hurt." Lila leaned over and whispered, "She said you carved it with her, that you promised to never stop looking for each other." Nathan blinked, caught off guard by the weight of that memory dragged back from a time before everything fractured. Before they had grown up and grown apart. He stood up abruptly and walked to the window, needing air that did not taste like antiseptic. Outside, the sun had climbed high, painting the city in lazy light. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Richard, his attorney. The temporary guardianship documents had been approved for emergency submission. All that remained was Ava's non-objection should she regain consciousness within the next 72 hours. If not, Nathan would become the girl's legal guardian until a permanent decision could be reached. The paperwork was ready. Now it was only time that stood in the way. That evening, the girls gathered around Ava's bed as usual, this time more solemn than before. June placed the sketch of the tree on her mother's chest, pressing it down with careful fingers. Rosie sang a few soft notes from a lullaby Ava had taught them, her voice barely louder than a breath. Lila held Ava's hand and whispered, "We're still here. And Uncle Nathan's here too." He brought pancakes and didn't forget the syrup. Nathan stood in the doorway watching. He had learned not to interrupt these moments. They were rituals sacred and unspoken, binding the girls to something deeper than hope. Something like belief. After the girls had been tucked into their borrowed beds in the family lounge, Nathan returned to Ava's room and pulled the chair closer to her side. He spoke aloud the way he had started doing every night. "The papers are ready, Ava. All that's left is your voice, your choice. But I'm not waiting for permission to love them. I already do. They're not just your daughters, they're ours now. Yours by birth. Mine by miracle. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the photograph again, now slightly curled at the edges. He placed it beside June's drawing on the tray. We kept our halves apart too long. Let's give them the whole picture. Then, as if the moment itself had grown heavy with breath, Ava's eyelids twitched, just once, then again. Nathan sat up straighter, leaning in. Her fingers trembled slightly against the blanket. The heart monitor beeped steadily, unchanged, but her hand moved again, this time more distinctly. "Ava," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open, slowly, unfocused at first. Then they settled on him, confused, weak, but aware. He stood carefully, not wanting to overwhelm her. "It's me, Nathan. You're safe. You're at the hospital. The girls are here. They're safe too." Her lips parted. A dry, cracked whisper escaped. "The girls. They found me," he said, his voice tight. "At the airport. Just showed up, like fate, I guess. They stayed with me. I stayed with them, and now we're all here." Tears welled in her eyes. She struggled to lift her hand. He took it gently, holding it between both of his. "You came," she whispered. "You really came. I should have come a long time ago," he said. "But I'm here now. And I'm not leaving." She looked toward the tray where her daughter's drawing and the photo half lay side by side. Her eyes widened slightly. "You kept it. Always," he said. "And you did too. We just didn't know it." She nodded weakly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I was going to send it. One day. But I thought you hated me." "Never," he said. "I just didn't know how to come back." They sat in silence for a long moment, her fingers still curled around his, the beeping of the monitor, the only sound in the room. Then she asked the question he had been waiting for. "The girls, are they okay?" "They're more than okay," he said. "They're extraordinary. They're you. And I think they might be saving me." Her smile was faint but real. "They're strong, stronger than I ever was. You gave them that," he said. "You gave them everything. I'm just here to catch the rest." That night, Nathan told the girls their mother had opened her eyes. June cried first quietly into her sketchbook. Rosie hugged the nurse who brought them the news. Leela did not move for a full minute, then simply said, "I knew she would." And as they pressed their foreheads to the hospital window, looking up at the night sky, as though Ava could hear them through the stars, Nathan stood behind them, one hand on each of their shoulders. The tree from June's drawing lived in his mind now clearer than ever. And for the first time in years, Nathan Cole did not feel like a man running from the past. He felt like a brother, like an uncle, like someone who had finally come home. The days following Ava's awakening passed like a cautious spring. Each hour brought a small thaw in the heavy air that had gripped the hospital room for so long. Her voice returned first in fragments, her memory in patches, and her strength like a slow tide edging back toward shore. She was still weak, often needing to rest after only a few minutes of conversation, but her eyes no longer floated aimlessly. They fixed on her daughters with soft purpose, and when they held her hand, she squeezed back. That alone made Lila cry for the first time in days. Nathan witnessed these reunions from a careful distance, at first understanding that the girls needed their mother's breath and words more than his presence. Still, he remained nearby, hovering like a silent wall between their fragile reunion and the rest of the world. He brought coffee every morning, not just for himself now, but for Ava too. She liked it with 1 spoonful of honey and a splash of almond milk, a detail Nathan remembered only after tasting 5 different variations. She teased him for getting it wrong at first, her voice hoarse but colored with the dry humor that once made their childhood tolerable. "You could coach the United Nations," she rasped one morning, "but you can't make coffee for your sister." He smiled and handed her the cup. "I make a better apology than a barista." Claire Stanton returned that week, no longer just asking questions, but preparing for the next phase. Now that Miss Cole is awake, she said briskly, flipping through forms at the foot of Ava's bed, "We'll need to begin discussions on custody and discharge planning." Ava looked at Nathan across the room, then back at Claire. "They've been with him the whole time," yes, Claire said. "But of course, temporary custody was approved only in your absence. If you wish to resume full guardianship, that is your right." Ava closed her eyes for a moment. "They're mine," she said quietly. "But he's been more than I could have asked for. We'll figure it out together." Later that day, Nathan helped her sit up longer than she had since arriving. The girls brought her drawings, each one covered in hearts and crooked rainbows. June added new pages to the wall gallery. Rosie offered her a jelly bean, her last green one. Lila brushed her mother's hair with a gentleness that made Nathan's throat tighten. They were forming something fragile but real, a new kind of family orbiting around this shared trauma and unexpected reunion. Ava watched them as if from a different time. "You missed a lot," she said softly to Nathan once the girls had wandered down the hall with a nurse. "I know," he replied, "but I think I was missing it before I even knew they existed." That evening, Nathan drove back to the rental house he had been preparing. The girls had not yet seen it, and Ava was still days away from being cleared for release. But he needed the space to feel like more than a holding pattern. The house was quiet when he stepped inside, smelling faintly of dust and pine cleaner. Boxes of toys had arrived earlier that morning, along with soft bedding and a stack of children's books. He walked through each room slowly. The girls' room was painted a pale lavender with 3 twin beds lined side by side beneath the window. A hand-painted wooden sign over the door read, "The Sky Room," named after one of June's drawings. In the living room he had hung the photograph, the one of him and Ava from childhood. Whole now. Both halves joined in a single frame. He spent the next hour unpacking clothes, folding them into small drawers labeled with the girls' names. It was an ordinary task, menial, yet something about it filled him with a sense of peace he rarely felt even in the glow of standing ovations. As he hung Ava's robe in the closet of the master bedroom, he paused and looked out the window. The tree stood just beyond the fence, towering and knotted with age. He could see the faint outline of something carved into its bark. He would take the girls there soon, he thought. Let them see where it all began. The next morning, Nathan returned to the hospital with news. "The house is ready," he told Ava. "Everything's set. The beds, the pantry, even a telescope for stargazing. Do you think they'll like it?" Ava looked at him, her smile faint but genuine. "If you're there, they'll love it." Claire arrived that afternoon with a discharge checklist. "We've scheduled the in-home assessment for tomorrow," she said, tapping her pen against her clipboard. "If the space meets standard, the girls can transition there with temporary approval." Ava leaned her head back against the pillow, clearly exhausted but relieved. "And me, you'll be discharged in 2 days," Claire said. "Once physical therapy signs off, then we can discuss full guardianship and living arrangements." After Claire left, Ava looked at Nathan, her voice low. "What do you want, Nathan?" After all this, he didn't answer right away. He sat on the edge of her bed, looking at the IV drip and the soft blue light of the heart monitor. "I want to be part of it, whatever you're building. I don't need to control it. I just want to belong to it, to them, to you." "If there's room," Ava reached out slowly, her fingers brushing his. "There's room, but no more disappearing. For either of us." The home assessment came on a rainy afternoon. The CPS agent walked through the house, inspecting the locks, checking the emergency exits, measuring the space between the stove and the high chair Nathan had impulsively purchased just in case. She paused at the bookshelf, running her fingers over the spines of bedtime stories. "They've never had their own room before," Nathan said quietly. "I wanted it to feel like theirs from the beginning." The agent nodded, once made a final note, and said, "We'll process this by tomorrow. So far it looks promising." That night, Nathan brought the girls to the house for the first time. They arrived with wide eyes and cautious steps, unsure if they were guests or residents. But once June saw the lavender walls and Lila spotted the backyard swing, and Rosie discovered the stuffed animals arranged in a row on each bed, they began to relax. June ran from room to room shouting, "Ours, ours," as if claiming territory. Rosie named her bed Daisy. Lila sat quietly on the window ledge, staring at the tree. "Is that the one?" she asked. Nathan nodded. "That's the one. She studied it for a long time." "Can we carve something too?" "Not with a knife," he said with a smile. "But I think we can find a way." After dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, they sat on the living room floor and made drawings of trees. Nathan gave each girl a marker and a sheet of thick paper. "Draw your version of the tree," he said. "What you think it should look like." When they finished, they taped each drawing to the wall. Then June pointed to the center and said, "That one's yours, Uncle Nathan. You draw too." He hesitated, then picked up a marker and began to sketch. His lines were rough, his branches crooked, but he added 3 small hearts in the roots and a sun peeking through the leaves. June clapped. "It's perfect." Later, as he tucked them into bed, Rosie asked, "Are we going back to the hospital tomorrow?" "Just to visit Mommy," he said. "Then she's coming here too." "Soon will she stay forever?" "That's the plan," he said. "If you want her to, I want all of us to stay," Rosie whispered. "You too." Nathan sat on the edge of her bed and kissed her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere." When the girls were asleep, he stepped outside onto the porch. The rain had stopped. The air smelled clean like possibility. He looked up at the tree, the moonlight catching on the rough bark. He thought of the carved symbol from their childhood, the spiral intersected by a line, their secret language. Home. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Ava. "They're asleep. They're happy. Thank you for trusting me. We're waiting for you. The tree is too." A moment later, she replied, "Thank you for finding them, and for finding your way back to me." He stared at her words, then slipped the phone into his pocket and leaned against the railing, listening to the night. It was quiet, but not empty. Never empty again. This house had no spotlight, no applause, no curated image to protect. Only the sounds of breath behind closed doors, the hush of leaves above the porch, and the steady heartbeat of something new taking shape. Nathan Cole, the man once defined by movement, had found a place to be still, and he knew without question he had landed exactly where he was meant to. Ava returned home 3 days later in the late morning light. The girls had been waiting on the porch since breakfast, still in their pajamas, refusing to start the day without her. June held a handmade welcome sign that drooped from her small fingers, the letters a mix of colors and backward S's. Lila stood with her arms crossed, watching the road like a sentry, and Rosie clutched a small bouquet of garden flowers Nathan had let her pick that morning. When the car finally turned the bend in the gravel path and rolled to a gentle stop, none of them moved at first. Then the door opened and Ava stepped out, her hair tied back and her face pale but smiling, and all 3 girls ran at once. They collided with her legs and arms and torso, crying and laughing, their voices tangled in a mess of breathless stories and questions and "I missed yous." Nathan stood a few steps behind, arms folded, watching with a look that said everything and nothing all at once. Ava met his eyes over the top of Lila's head, and she nodded once. It was the kind of moment that did not require applause or documentation. It lived in silence, carved into memory without needing to be spoken aloud. The girls helped carry her bag inside, arguing over who would hold the handle and who would open the door. Ava let them squabble, resting a hand on each of their backs, and allowed herself to be guided into the home she had never imagined returning to with so much love waiting inside. She moved slowly, leaning on Nathan's arm when needed, and paused in every room like she was reacquainting herself with the very idea of safety. "You did all this," she whispered to him as they stood in the kitchen. "This whole world you made for them." "For us," Nathan corrected gently. "I made it for us." They spent the rest of the day together as a unit. The girls showed Ava their drawings taped to the walls and the names they had given their beds. Rosie introduced her mother to Daisy the pillow. June handed her a family tree she had scribbled in crayon with Ava, and Nathan drawn as large, smiling stick figures at the top and 3 wobbly girls underneath. At the center, she had drawn a son wearing sunglasses and labeled it Uncle. Ava laughed so hard she had to sit down that evening. They had dinner around the small round table Nathan had found at a thrift store. He had polished the wood until it shone. They ate spaghetti with too much Parmesan and garlic bread that came out slightly burnt, but no one complained. The girls talked over each other, telling Ava about Nathan's bedtime stories and the night June fell asleep in his lap while he read a book about dragons. Ava listened with wide eyes, then looked at Nathan. Dragons. He shrugged. It was that, or the philosophy of Stoicism. Dragons won. After dinner, they sat outside on the porch and watched the stars appear. Nathan had brought out the telescope, and one by one the girls peered through it, gasping as he pointed out Jupiter and the faint ring of Saturn. Lila asked if the stars could see them too. Nathan said he liked to think so. Rosie curled into Ava's lap. "Do you think stars ever get lonely?" she asked. Ava kissed the top of her head. "Not if they're part of a constellation," she said. "Then they're always connected." Nathan looked up at the sky, thinking about that. The girls eventually dozed off in blankets beneath the porch light, and he and Ava carried them inside one by one. As he tucked June in, she stirred and mumbled, "Don't leave tonight." "Never," he whispered. After they settled the girls, Ava made tea, and they sat in the quiet living room surrounded by the remnants of art projects and board games and childhood chaos. She held her mug in both hands and looked at him with the weight of years in her eyes. "I need to know something," she said. "When did it change for you? When did this stop being an obligation and become something more?" Nathan did not answer right away. He leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling, then closed his eyes. "It was the first night you were in the hospital. I sat with them and didn't know what to say. I read a story I didn't understand, and they still listened." June fell asleep with her head on my knee, and I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of messing up, not of failing. I was afraid of never having this again. That's when it changed. Ava nodded slowly. "I didn't know if you'd come. I was so sure you'd moved on from me." "From family, I did," he said quietly. "Or I thought I did. But then 3 girls stopped me on the way to my plane, and they tore open something I'd sealed shut." She reached for his hand across the table and squeezed it. "Thank you for letting it open." The following week brought routine. Mornings began with cereal and spilled juice, followed by chaotic efforts to match socks and tame tangled hair. Nathan learned how to braid thanks to a tutorial video and June's patient instructions. He burned pancakes twice and once packed peanut butter sandwiches into Ava's purse instead of the girls' lunchboxes. Ava laughed so hard she cried. Claire Stanton returned to follow up on the transition. She sat stiffly at the kitchen table taking notes as the girls colored beside her. "Have you discussed long-term arrangements?" she asked Ava and Nathan. Ava nodded. "We're co-parenting, as siblings, as a family. No paperwork will change that." Claire tapped her pen. "But legally, someone needs to be the primary guardian. For now." "Then it's me," Ava said calmly. "They're my daughters, and he's their uncle. We live under one roof. We raise them together. That's the arrangement." Claire glanced at Nathan. "And you're content with that?" Nathan smiled. "I gave up stages and spotlights for bedtime stories and sidewalk chalk. I've never been more content." Claire sighed and closed her folder. "Very well. I will submit the update, but I will be returning in 2 weeks for a final assessment." As she stood to leave, Rosie approached her holding a drawing. It showed 5 stick figures holding hands under a giant tree. Above it she had written in block letters, "Family." Claire took it with a small nod, her expression unreadable. Then she left. That evening, Nathan and Ava sat on the back porch watching the sun dip behind the hills. The girls were asleep, their laughter still echoing faintly through the open windows. "You know," Ava said, "I used to dream of this, not the house, not even the tree, just a day that ended in peace." Nathan looked at her, and now she shrugged. "Now I want more days, not just for me, for them, and for you." You belong here, Nathan. You always did. You just forgot for a while. Then thank you for reminding me, he said softly. That night, as Nathan walked through the quiet halls, he passed the door to the girls' room and paused. June had kicked off her blanket. He tucked it back over her gently. Rosie clutched her locket in one hand. Lila had a book resting on her chest. He watched them for a long moment. These small lives, these fragile hearts. And then he whispered to the darkness, not sure who he was speaking to. Maybe his younger self, maybe their late mother, maybe the stars. Thank you for the detour, he said. It saved me. Outside, the tree swayed gently in the night wind. Its branches stretched toward the house like arms. The carving from his childhood still marked its side. And now, underneath it, 3 new drawings fluttered on weatherproof paper taped by small hands to the bark. Family, home, forever. Nathan smiled and turned off the porch light. He no longer needed to see his way forward. He had already arrived. Nathan woke to the sound of rain tapping against the windows and the soft creak of footsteps in the hallway. It was still early, the sky a muted gray and the air thick with the scent of earth and dew. He slipped out of bed, pulled on a sweater, and stepped into the hallway where he found Lila sitting on the floor in front of Rosie, and June's room, her arms wrapped around her knees and her face serious. She looked up at him but did not say anything at first. He sat beside her and waited. She's going to forget us again, Lila whispered finally. Like before, Nathan glanced at the closed door and then at Lila's worried eyes. Who, Mommy? She said. When she got sick, she stopped talking to us, like we weren't really there. And now she smiles, but sometimes she looks like she's somewhere else. Nathan nodded slowly. Do you want to know a secret? Lila looked sideways at him and gave the tiniest nod. Grown-ups get scared too, he said, even when they pretend they are fine. And sometimes when they are scared, they go quiet. But your mommy loves you. She never stopped. Lila's brow furrowed. But how do you know? Because I know your mom, he said softly. Better than anyone. She's strong, but she is human, just like the rest of us. You didn't do anything wrong, and she will never stop loving you. Lila leaned into his shoulder. Promise. Nathan wrapped his arm around her and whispered, Promise. Later that morning, as the rain lightened and the kitchen filled with the smell of cinnamon toast, Ava joined them at the table. Her eyes looked clearer, her steps more certain. The girls surrounded her with chatter, but Lila remained a little quieter than usual. Ava noticed. She reached over and brushed a strand of hair behind Lila's ear. You okay, sweet pea? Lila studied her for a moment. Are you really back? Ava smiled. I never left. I just got lost for a little while. That seemed to be enough for Lila, who nodded and leaned into her mother's side. Nathan spent the afternoon organizing boxes in the garage. Most of them were filled with old remnants of his previous life. Stage props, signed copies of his books, award plaques. One box was labeled Europe Tour and filled with photos, ticket stubs, and notes. At the bottom, he found a worn leather journal. It was Ava's. He recognized her handwriting instantly. His breath caught as he opened the cover. The first page read, In case I forget who I am, let this remind me. He flipped through the entries. Some were full of drawings, some were scattered thoughts, and some were letters. Letters to the girls, letters to him. One said, Nathan, I know you hate me. I think I would hate me too. But if by some miracle you ever read this, please remember I never wanted to be your enemy. I just wanted to survive. He closed the journal and sat in silence for a long time. That evening they built a fire in the backyard and roasted marshmallows. June taught Nathan how to make the perfect s'more and insisted he eat it in one bite. He did and nearly choked. The girls erupted in laughter. Ava watched them with a kind of quiet awe. She looked at Nathan and said, I had no idea you were this kind of man. Neither did I, he said. They made me into it. That night after the girls were tucked into bed, Ava found the journal sitting on the kitchen table. She opened it slowly and saw Nathan's note written on the inside cover. "You were never my enemy, just the piece I thought I lost." She touched the words and let herself cry. The next morning brought an unexpected visit. Claire Stanton returned earlier than planned. She stood at the door in her pressed blazer holding a manila folder. "May I come in?" she asked. Ava hesitated but nodded. Nathan joined them at the dining table while the girls played in the other room. Claire sat and opened her folder. "There's been a development," she said. "Your case has drawn some attention." "What kind of attention?" Nathan asked cautiously. "From the board," Claire said. "There are concerns about the informal nature of this arrangement, about precedent. They want documentation, proof of stability, long-term intentions." "We are stable," Ava said. "We're better than stable. We're healing. And I believe you," Claire said. "But I have superiors, and they want formal guardianship filed. One adult, one signature, or this goes to family court in 3 weeks." The room went silent. Then Ava said, "Then we file." Claire looked at her. "Are you sure?" Ava nodded. "Yes, we file. And I want Nathan's name on everything. If anything ever happens to me, the girls stay with him." No matter what, Nathan stared at her, stunned. "Ava, are you sure?" "Yes," she said firmly. "You're not just part of this. You're the reason it works." The next week was filled with paperwork, home visits, and long conversations. The girls were remarkably patient. June even offered to draw a courtroom scene just in case they needed visual evidence. Nathan and Ava laughed more than they cried, but there were still heavy moments. One night, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, Ava said, "You know what scares me the most?" Nathan waited. "That I'll mess this up. That I'll backslide. That one day they'll look at me the way I used to look at our parents." "You won't," he said, "because you show up every single day. That's more than they ever did." "You really believe that I do," he said, "because I see it. In their eyes. In the way Rosie waits for your approval. In the way June mimics your laugh. In the way Lila checks on you before she goes to bed." Ava smiled through tears. "They saved me." Nathan looked at her. "They saved me too." The hearing was set for a Monday morning. The courthouse was a modest building with white columns and faded carpet. Nathan wore a suit. Ava wore a navy dress the girls had picked out. The girls stayed home with a neighbor too young to understand the weight of the day. Claire met them in the hallway and gave a small nod. "I'll speak on your behalf," she said, "but the judge will have questions. Just answer honestly." They entered the courtroom together. The judge, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes, sat behind a wide wooden bench. She reviewed the file quietly before speaking. "I've read through the reports. This is an unusual case, but not unprecedented. You are siblings. One of you is the biological parent. The other has assumed full-time support and co-guardianship. You live together. You have demonstrated stability. What I need to know now is intent. Why should I formalize this arrangement?" Ava stood first. Her voice trembled, but held. "Because we're a family," she said. "Because I made mistakes. Because I ran away. But I came back. And he didn't close the door on me. He opened his home. He didn't have to. But he did. And he saved my daughters when I couldn't." The judge looked at Nathan. "And you, Sir?" Nathan cleared his throat. "I used to tell people how to live, how to fix themselves. But I didn't know how to love. Not really. These girls taught me. They made me better. I don't want a role. I want to be here. For the long haul. Whatever that takes." The judge nodded slowly. "Very well. I grant joint guardianship, full legal standing to both parties. Review in 12 months, Claire smiled. Ava let out a long breath. Nathan sat down, a wave of something deep and old lifting off his chest. That evening the girls greeted them with signs and confetti made from cut-up magazines. June wore a judge's robe made from a blanket. Lila held up a paper gavel. Rosie announced, "We the girls declare this family official." Nathan laughed. Ava scooped them into her arms and whispered, "It always was." As night settled, Nathan sat by the tree with the carving. He added a new mark beside it. 3 stars, one for each girl. When Ava joined him, he handed her the carving knife. She added a 4th. For the one who stayed, she said, and beside it a 5th. For the one who came back. The stars above flickered gently, as if in agreement. Tomorrow would be another day, but tonight they were whole, and that was enough. It had been 6 months since the courtroom declared what the girls already knew in their hearts. The mornings had grown slower, gentler. The house no longer felt like a temporary place waiting for change. It had become a home filled with worn rugs, mismatched mugs, and quiet routines. Ava still had hard days, but fewer than before. The girls still argued over who got the last blueberry muffin or which movie to watch, but they always ended up tangled together on the couch legs and arms like vines, their laughter the background music of the home. Nathan had adjusted to life without the stage. His schedule no longer revolved around flights and appearances. Instead, he focused on something smaller but far more meaningful. He had begun rebuilding something from the inside out. It started with the treehouse, the same one he and Ava had built when they were children, nestled deep in the woods behind their family's old summer home. It had been abandoned for years, the ladder rotted and the roof half caved in. But one weekend, with the girls watching from the hill and Ava sipping coffee from a thermos, Nathan began to fix it. Slowly, deliberately, each board replaced felt like mending something inside himself. The girls helped him paint the inside. Rosie picked yellow. Lila added flowers. June covered the walls with stars and moons. They called it the Sky Room. By the time summer rolled in fully, Nathan had turned the idea into something larger. One morning over pancakes, he told Ava about it. "I want to build something that lasts," he said. "Not a company. Not another book. Something real. Something for them. And kids like them." Ava raised an eyebrow. "Like what A place for families in transition," he said. "For kids who fall through the cracks. For moms trying to get back on their feet. For dads like me who had to be taught how to show up." Ava put down her fork. "You're serious?" "Completely," he said. "I already started the paperwork. I want to call it the Family We Build Project." Ava smiled slowly. "It's perfect." Word spread quickly. Journalists started knocking. Old colleagues reached out. His agent sent a long, confused email asking why he had walked away at the height of his fame. But Nathan ignored it all. He was done performing. What he wanted now was presence. The foundation broke ground in early fall. It sat on 10 acres of donated land just outside the city. The girls helped Nathan plant the first tree on the property. Each placed a letter into a jar and buried it beneath the roots. Lila's read, "I hope this helps someone like Mommy." June's said, "If you're scared, we will wait with you." Rosie's simply read, "You are not alone." That night, under a sky dotted with stars, Nathan and Ava sat on the porch watching the lights from the worksite twinkle in the distance. Ava leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" she asked. Nathan nodded. "All the time. Do you regret it?" "Only the years I stayed silent," he said. "The rest led me here." Ava reached into her pocket and pulled out a photo. It was the torn one from his drawer, now taped together. She handed it to him. "You kept this all those years. Couldn't let go," he said. "Even when I pretended I had. You never really hated me, did you?" "Never," he said. "I hated how much I missed you." The girls started school that fall. Lila took to leadership roles, instantly organizing class cleanups and helping shy kids speak up. June became the unofficial class artist, filling every corner of the classroom with bright images. Rosie remained a mystery to most, but her teacher said she had a calming presence that made the whole room feel softer. Nathan adjusted to quieter days without them underfoot. He missed their chaos, but he filled the hours with plans for the foundation, hiring staff, choosing architects, sitting with mothers who reminded him of Ava, wide-eyed and exhausted but full of fight. One afternoon he gave a talk at a local center. No stage, no lights, just folding chairs and a broken microphone. He spoke about losing time, about letting go of pride, about choosing to show up even when it hurt. When he finished, no one clapped. But one woman stood and asked, "What do you do when it feels like too much?" Nathan answered quietly, "You ask for help, and you keep going, even when you're scared, especially when you are scared." Later that night, Ava found him sitting alone in the kitchen nursing a cup of tea. "I heard about your talk," she said. "Word travels fast in small circles." "Did I say too much?" he asked. "No," she said. "You said exactly what needed to be heard." She sat beside him. "You're not the same man who almost got on that plane." "No," he agreed, "and I don't want to be." Ava reached into her pocket again. This time she pulled out a ring. It was a simple band, their mother's. "She left this with me," Ava said. "I didn't tell you because I was still angry back then. But I think she wanted us to have it." Nathan stared at the ring. "Do you want it back?" "No," she said. "I want you to have it. For them. For the family we are building." Nathan took it gently. "Thank you." Winter came with early darkness and soft snow, the house filled with the scent of baking bread and pine. The girls helped hang lights on every corner. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Lila asked, "Will we always live together?" Ava looked at Nathan. He answered, "As long as you want. This is your home." Rosie climbed into his lap. "Even when we're big." "Even then," he said, "you'll always have a key." On Christmas morning, the girls woke early and ran downstairs to find stockings and cinnamon rolls and a single gift each under the tree. They tore through the wrapping paper with squeals and laughter. June opened a paint set. Rosie found a locket with tiny photos of all 5 of them inside. Lila's box held a compass. When she opened it, Nathan said, "To remind you that no matter where you go, you always have a way back home." Ava gave Nathan a box last. Inside was a framed drawing of the treehouse. The girls stood at the bottom, hands raised. Ava and Nathan stood above, arms wide. At the bottom it read, "The family we build is the one we choose to stay with." Nathan choked back emotion. "This is the best gift I've ever received." Ava smiled. "It's from all of us." As the year came to a close, the foundation neared completion. The girls painted a mural on one wall with other children in the neighborhood. It showed people of all ages building something together, brick by brick, hand in hand. On opening day, Ava stood beside Nathan on the makeshift stage. The girls sat in the front row beaming. Nathan stepped forward. "I used to think I needed to reach millions," he said. "That success was something loud and shiny. But the truth is, real success is quiet. It's in the hands you hold, the meals you share, the second chances you offer. This place is not about me. It's about all of us. It's about the families we choose, the ones we fight for, the ones we build. Thank you for helping us make this real." When the crowd stood and clapped, Nathan looked at Ava. She squeezed his hand. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," he replied. That night back home, the girls fell asleep early. Nathan and Ava stood on the porch watching the stars. The wind was gentle, the sky wide. "Do you miss it?" Ava asked. "The stages?" The applause. Nathan shook his head. "Not even a little. This is what I was meant to build. A life, a home, a reason to stay." Ava nodded. "I'm proud of you." He looked at her, eyes shining. "I'm proud of us." In the distance, the wind rustled the trees, carrying with it the sounds of laughter and light. The treehouse stood tall and steady, its walls now filled with stories. And somewhere inside, under the floorboards, rested the letters of 3 little girls who had once stopped a man at the edge of his old life and whispered one word that changed everything. Help. And he had listened. He had stayed. And together they had built something that would never be torn down again. If this story moved you, take a moment to breathe it in. From a man on the edge of leaving everything behind, to a family built not by blood, but by bravery, forgiveness, and love. Sometimes the most important journeys don't begin with a grand plan. They begin with one small word whispered by someone who still believes in you. If you felt that, leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We read every single one. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe because the next story might just change the way you see everything.